What's going on, everybody? This is Grant at Cause Artist. In this episode of Disruptors for Good, I chat with Bas Van Abel, who's the founder of Fairphone. And if you don't know what Fairphone is, it is basically an ethical cell phone. At its basis level, that's what their mission is, to create an ethical and sustainable electronic device that we can all use. And, fair trade, sustainability, those terms can mean different things to different people. But if you look at the food industry and the fashion industry, how there has been a real change in what we look at when we buy our food, who makes it or how we buy our fashion, who makes our fashion, are the people who making our food and our clothes, are they, treated with respect, and all these different parts that can go into the dark side of creating products that we consume. Those industries have taken a great approach in installing fair trade mentalities and ethical standards and sustainability metrics, and those industries have really developed into a more positive angle, and you see more and more companies and brands every year upping their sustainability practices in those parts, because one, we as consumers are wanting that now. We have the internet, we have researched and discovered a lot of different things about food in the clothing industry, and it hasn't been so good. But now that we have the ability to research for ourselves a lot of these different industries, we now have the power to change those, and that's happening. The other part is electronics, right? We don't think of electronics as something like food or fashion, where maybe because we don't know how they're made, and we don't know the parts that go into it and all the complexities of that we haven't, as a society, as a consumer base, as governments, really looked at that industry and said, hey, what can we do better? What are the problems facing that? And that's what Fairphone and Bas and his team have done over the last several years. They have created one of the best companies in the world. I mean, they are attacking a massive part of our business world, and their efforts have been amazing. They have won many awards. Fairphone himself have won many awards. Bas has won many awards. Spoke at TED. Has done a lot of different things for the community of just creating the community of ethical electronics, and how we can do better as companies and as consumers when we go to buy an electronic device. So we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about his mental struggles as a founder, right? Going and building a company that gotten a lot bigger than he ever thought it could, right? And dealing with that on a personal level, dealing with funding, and dealing with supporting all the consumers that have bought a Fairphone device, and all these different things that come with actually creating a supply chain, and not only a supply chain, but an ethical one that he can be proud of, his team can be proud of, and actually going to the Congo, going to Uganda, and looking at their standards, and seeing how can we change them, how can we make them better, how we consumers can help with that. So it's a long range conversation about a lot of different things, and I really respect Bas and his team for what they have done and accomplished already, and I really can't wait to see what happens with the future of Fairphone. They just raised another round, so hopefully we'll eventually get them to the United States. They're currently only in Europe right now. So I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. It was a blast for me to do this. I've been a fan for Bas and Fairphone for a while, so it was really fun to do this and kind of deep dive into his thoughts and just his mentality on how to build a company like this. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to just show you a bit under the hood of how, what it takes to do it, and also how much naivety it takes to actually start something as stupid as a phone company.
Well, let's start there into exactly, for those who don't know what Fairphone is. How, when people come up to you and ask you what is Fairphone, how do you explain the company to them?
Yeah, so it's multidimensional. So it always depends on who I'm talking to, what kind of angle I take, and that's also the beauty of the product, but also the complexity of it. Just very simply said, it's a phone. but we tried to make the phone as fair as possible, and that if you talk about fairness and phones, there's not really a definition on ethical technology and sustainability within the technology sphere. It's not as simple as it's not a banana.
Right.
A phone is not a banana, and by now I figured out quite a lot of the differences between the two. There are some similarities, but if you look at fair trade, what fair trade has done for agricultural products. Is very similar from where Fairphone has started. We really go all the way back into the mines, the minerals. There's more than 40 minerals in the phone, and they're all being mined. They've just been taken out of the ground all around the world. So, there's obviously a lot wrong there. So that's what we're working on. We're working on the way the phone is produced, so the working conditions in factories, on our bill of material, which means, the list of components that go into the phone, we already count like 1,200 of components. So these are all made by hundreds of factories around the world. So we try to focus on the areas where we have influence on, and also where we can make a difference, which is our direct suppliers. But we also look at the design of the phone, make it in a way that people can use it longer, so you don't have to make a lot of phones, because that's kind of the it's always a difficult one when you look at being a company and you want to trade. You want people to use your product as long as possible, where your business model is still selling those products. Yeah. And I think that's also one of the elements that makes Fairphone nice, because it's also an exercise into how can you run a company in a way that you balance these kind of dilemmas of creating something and destroying something at the same time. And I think that's also the root of what makes us a social enterprise. We ask these questions, but there's we're also working on open source software, the transparency of the supply chain, all these kind of things that are connected to the question, what is fair in the industry of electronics.
So what did you see initially when you first wanted to start the company in the supply chains that already existed? What did you see that sort of bothered you on maybe a human level, that you said, hey, these things can be changed, we can do a better job?
Yeah, so if you look at my own background, I've been working in technology for quite a while, and I've always looked at very critically at technology and how it the influence it has on our lives, but in a positive, but also sometimes a negative way. And one of those things is also that technology becomes so complex that we have no idea actually where it comes from. So my fascination was much more on what is the relationship between something as complex as a smartphone and the actual origin of it. And we've, in our economic system, we've lost that connection. We've alienated from these things. And the nice thing about open source software development and working together on code is that you're both a user of that product, and you're also a contributor to that product. And I wanted, the Fairphone, to me, when we started, we didn't have the vision of starting a company, but our vision was, how do we make people part of what's happening behind the scenes. And what's happening behind the scenes goes all the way back to people digging into the ground and trying to make a living out of, going 60 meters deep into a hole and staying there for a couple of days, and then getting some of the minerals out there that are the start of something as complex as the phone. And how do we create a relationship between what's happening there and what improvements are needed as well, and the consumer. But first you need to establish a relationship, because if you say, well, guys, there are people dying in Africa because of wars that are connected to minerals that we use far down the supply chain in our electronics. I don't think a lot of people will say like, ooh, yeah, that's a problem, a lot of people are dying in Africa, shit. But what do I have to do with it?
Right.
Yeah, so it's really about that feeling of, how do you how do you connect again to the fact that the beauty of our economic system, the fact that we have these very complex products and that we're able to make them, is because we are able to work together on it. Because as an individual, you would never be able to make a smartphone. You would never be able to understand it even. Like I said, it's not a banana. So the complexity of it is, we are able to make a complex product because we work together. So how do we make that feeling of working together on products again? And I had that with open source, and I wanted to see if we could get that feeling in the phone, using the phone basically as a platform to get that feeling back again, and to also address one of the, the biggest issues around our economic systems, and that there's a lot of external cost, including also conflicts in Congo where rebels are fighting over resources that we use in our electronics products.
That's obviously a huge hurdle to get over, is going to the Congo, for example, and trying to build a relationship where there's a lot of things going on, whether it's civil war, whether it's corruption. There's a lot of different facets of going into a country like that and trying to change the way they normally operate when it comes to mining or when it comes to just doing business in general. So what was that like, going into some of these places and trying to fix maybe a culture that's been there for so long?
Yeah, I think one of the first things you'll notice when you start doing this, especially as a company, is that even though your vision might be to create a beautiful, fair economic system, or at least be part of that change towards that. But once you start doing that as a company, you're also going to be dictated by the same economic system you're trying to change. So how we've approached it every time is also to be somewhat strategically naive into going. So basically what we've done is we said, let's go to Congo, let's find a fair mine, and let's ask around. Let's ask around if there are people who can point us towards a mine where they do fair mining. And we start with cobalt, a resource that's used for your battery, which is now really high on the agenda because of the energy transition.
Yep.
So we've done that like 7 years ago. We just did that. We made a business card, and I was the CEO of a fake company called Fairphone, and we just went around there, and and then you bump into I think the first thing I had to do was to bribe the Minister of Communication of Congo to be able to film in the mines for $250. And that was kind of like my first
day one.
my first executive decision. One of my first executive decision as the CEO of a company called Fairphone. So at that point I was like, okay, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a rough ride. But it's also the fact that what I've done at that time was I tweeted about it. And I said, holy shit, man, I just had to bribe the minister of a company, of a country of 80 million people for $250, and he even gave me a receipt. And then we got the embassy who was super angry at us because they helped us to get in contact with for the permits and everything. And the conversation around that of like, okay, but wait a minute. Why are we hiding as companies the ugly truth about all these things that we are dealing with, and why are we not addressing them? Because one of the things that companies are really have become really good at, in combination with a very heavy litigation culture, is risk avoidance. There's huge compliance in these supply chains, and they also all this auditing and all these things happening around the world, in factories, in mines, and everywhere where there's stuff going wrong. There's auditors, but did it actually improve things? No, it made companies hide things, and I think that's one of the things that we've started to do with Fairphone. We started to show what was going on. And that is, it's just a pure, it's a first step, and it's not a solution already to the problem, but it's one of the first steps to find a safe space. And that's what we're trying to create, a safe space also for other companies to join and not hide or just avoid the problem. So from there on, we were able, by telling the story, we had companies that said, yeah, that's exactly the problem. And, and we were being punished for it as well. And they said, well, let's try and just go into these areas and work with these mines. Even though there's child labor, let's just work in these mines and let's take a first step and track and trace the minerals so that we know that there is no conflict related to it. And of course, still, things go wrong. Of course, the health and safety conditions are horrible, but at least we can work from there and set an agenda on improving things. And I think that's also where fair trade in the 70s, 80s on food started. Mm-hmm. They didn't go and avoid the problem. They went to areas where they could actually contribute to improving the conditions. Where conditions were really bad, but where the economic system, in a sort, some kind of natural way, because the wages are low and it's easier to just get stuff there, was going to. We might as well have gone to Australia and get our stuff there because they also have mines and their working conditions are a lot better than Congo.
So there's other parts of the world that had these materials.
Yeah, of course, and it's just that
it's just cheaper to get them from certain parts of the world.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that there's especially with cobalt, there's most of the supplies of cobalt are in Congo, Zambia, and of course you can get them somewhere else. But most of a lot of the economic activity is focused on that. But if companies leave because there's laws telling them that they have to comply with certain things, which makes it very difficult for them to actually operate in these areas, then people there also they lose their livelihoods, and the opposite effect happens, that they start joining rebels and doing all kinds of stuff that they would normally not do if they would have an income through mining. So it's a super difficult long-term thing that you're addressing, and of course you cannot solve that just by being a company and being present there and having market power. You also have the government, you have local NGOs involved, you have all these players that have to be involved into creating a change. But in the end, it's as simple as that. It's a start of a product that is being used by a consumer, by a customer. And by creating a market and telling this story, we were able to put it on the agenda of any company, this transparency. And once the story is out there, and once people know that the same problems in electronics are happening in the clothing industry, as are happening in the food industry, then at least there's a starting point, there's a safe space for everyone to start moving the agenda towards solutions instead of just hiding all the problems like has been the modus operandi in the last 20, 30 years.
I think that's a great point to make about the food industry was sort of first in realizing there was a problem and starting the long journey of changing the supply chain and also what goes in our food, right? That's obviously a big deal too. And then we're at a point where the fashion industry is sort of being disrupted in the same way as food was, where transparency is playing a huge part. It's starting to play a huge part because people are like they're going into these places, and whether it's filming or interviewing people there and showing people that, look, it matters where you buy things from. But not only that, it matters where you put your dollars, because you can actually change stuff as a consumer. I truly believe that. I truly believe that our consumer dollar is, especially in the U.S., is worth way more than our vote here. If we shifted our consumer mindset just by 10, 15, 20% at scale, that is a massive transition that throws economic value to a lot of places in the world, that you can prevent people from going into, going to be a rebel soldier or going to join, a certain terror group, right? Or going down a road of being addicted to drugs or something like that. I mean, there's economic value it's so apparent for communities to rise themselves out of poverty. And it all starts with buying products. Like, it's very simple, actually. It's just, I think, educating the public, having them discover different ethical alternatives that they can buy and that they should buy, is I think where we're heading and where we're at a little bit now.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think we are both aligned on this one. And there are several ways and several a lot of things you can do around it. But in the end, and that's also the beauty of a supply chain. There's only someone going to dig a hole in the ground in Congo to get minerals out of the ground if there's a person all down, way down that supply chain that actually is going to buy a product once it's put into a product. And these whole supply chains function based on the fact that there's a person that has a need. Mm-hmm. And that makes it that you have quite some power as a consumer. The only problem is, and that is one of the things that I see in technology, transparency goes up to a certain point, because you have different ways of transparency. You have you have radical transparency, which I don't believe in the context of electronics. If you look at the complexity of the supply chain, it's just not possible to map out the whole supply chain. And by the time you've done that, it changed already. Just as an example, you can map out the whole supply chain of Fairphone, and we've done quite a bit of that. But by the time we've launched our first product, our first with Fairphone 2, by the time we produced our first phones, we already had 7 of our key suppliers, which are about 100, that went either bankrupt, that we had to change, that didn't want to work with us anymore. So it's super dynamic. It's not the whole bean to bar idea of having a bean and having that same bean in your coffee is fantastic, for a very simple product like coffee. But the electronics doesn't work that way. So there's no way to actually understand that full complexity and to map it and really have use it in a valuable way. So I think it's also about finding the spots where you can actually make a difference instead of trying to create world peace in the supply chain of electronics, because that's just too big.
What the current life cycle of a cell phone is, what it is, materials are mined. All the parts are come together somewheres, or it's made separately in different areas. It gets made, bought by the consumer. Traditional cell phone, I mean. Yeah. It bought by the consumer. Then when a new cell phone comes out, a year and a half later or something, the other one just gets sold back or thrown away. And there's a lot of phones that end up as wasteful products too, right? They're just ends up in the ocean or landfill. And
so before that, it's indeed that, like I said, there's more than 40 minerals going into a cell phone, and they're all mined at different stages. And they're going to so there's to give an example, in Congo a lot of artisanal mining is being done. So there's concessions and there's cooperatives working there, and they put it in bags, and all these bags are collected, go to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, moved into China to smelters, and then from smelters they make the metals out of it, and then they go into semiconductors, components, all these things, and then they end up in a factory like ours, where we put all these things together and make them into an integral system. So there's already thousands and thousands of factories involved before that point. Yeah, so just to give you an idea of that, it's, and then I'm not even talking about the mine workers and everyone involved there. So from that point on, the phones are being shipped obviously to the markets. The markets they distribute the phones, so it might take a couple of months before they're in the hand of the consumer, and then the consumer uses them on average around 1.5 to 2 years. So you're about right there, and that's exactly one of the things that we address, because we've done a life cycle assessment on the phone, and around 70% of the footprint, the CO2 footprint of a phone, is in the production of it. So everything that happens before you have it in the hand. So using a phone actually takes, an energy consumption. It takes about the same energy as driving around a car for 2 hours. So there's no real, actually, to put it bluntly, once you have the phone in your hand, the shit already has been done. So it's just please keep it as long as possible.
Right.
That would be the best way to deal with it. To optimize the supply chain, there's a lot of stuff you can do, but I don't think it will weigh up to the impact you can have as a consumer, as a user of the phone, to increase the lifespan of a phone and not have to make another phone. So, it's a very simple calculation. If you keep your phone twice as long, you only need to produce half the amount of phones. And that's a huge, positive impact you can have as a customer, as a user of that phone. So what we focus on is exactly that. Because if you only need to produce half the amount of phones, you only produce half the amount of waste that will end up, and you will have to recycle or whatever. So that is a very important focus point, and a lot of companies don't dare to really go into that area because, you can imagine if you're a big phone company and you're the CEO of a big phone company, you stage to your shareholders, guys, listen, we're going to our sustainability strategy now is to produce only the half amount of products that we've done last year.
Right.
It's like,
no, it's such a tough dynamic because you have two fighting variables, right? You have the public markets that are dictated by hitting sales goals and quarterly revenue and all these different things, and if it's not really good for society, nobody really cares. But and then on the other hand, like an actual human way to do things is really, like you said, just we got to tell our consumers to stop buying as much of our product. It's such a weird thing.
But that's what makes you different as a social enterprise, because your first question was also what is Fairphone? And of course, it's just a phone. It's a phone, and we do stuff in the supply chain. But it's also this dilemma that you embrace, because we embrace it also by our KPIs, for example, in the company, our key performance. Our success indicators are, one, how many phones do we sell? Because we want to show that there's a market for ethical electronics. But we also, one of the other success indicators is the length, the duration of which people use the phone. So a salesperson, in that sense, has always has the dilemma of not having to sell a phone to the same person after too short of a period. Because the other success indicator says, well, but you want that person to keep it as long as possible. And this is the dilemma that, for me, goes back to the very essence of life. Because it's, life is about creating and destroying at the same time by being. And it's a philosophical dilemma, and it's also the tragedy also about being in this world, that you have a footprint. It's just how it is. People can commit suicide, and then you have less of a footprint, but you also contribute less to the ecosystem you actually part.
Right.
I see companies the same way. So it's not we have to go beyond dogmatism of things being very black and white. You have to find a balance. And I think one of the biggest challenges for companies now is how do I, especially companies that use minerals a lot, but also online companies, because they use a lot of minerals as well for all these farms they set up for data and all. Right. So there's the whole physical world behind the bits and the bytes. But really to disconnect our business models from the use of resources. So you have to go into service models. And, it really makes sense to sell, for example, a phone as a service for a company. It also is better for the customer, because at the moment that I sell a phone to a customer, it becomes a cost center. the customer goes to cost center because I have to service the phones. If something breaks, the money is already on the bank account. If something breaks, it's actually something I have to I have to keep giving service on, and there's actually a guarantee on a phone for 2 years. And I only can make money by selling another phone. But what if if a customer actually pays for the use of the phone only, then the support can actually be an income stream. So you say, well, with extra support, you can. So you have to give kind of incentives and new business models to customers and companies to keep products in the hands of the customer as long as possible. And the governments can also help with that. For example, Sweden has done a great law on repairs. They not a law, but they actually lowered the tax rates on repairs so that products would actually be in the market for longer. And they would also incentivize entrepreneurs to start repair shops.
So their law is that they incentivize, for example, a company like Fairphone to have repair centers, and that they would have certain tax deductions for doing that?
No. So the VAT on repairs is lower than all the other VAT. So that means that that actually doing a repair will cost you less than so that actually they give tax incentives of having a repair done for customers. So for customers, it's cheaper to do a repair because the VAT on repairs is lower. Yeah. And for companies, they can make more money on repairs because there's more customers that there's more, they're creating more demand for it. That's only done purely by lowering the taxes on it. So it's not the companies themselves that would do the repairs. It would be repair shops, new business opportunities for companies because the demand is getting up. So for Fairphone, it works differently. We make fully consumer repairable phones. In that sense, we're the first ones that make phones that consumers can actually just buy the parts themselves and replace them themselves, which is another model of repairs. Our thinking behind it is that you have to make the threshold of keeping the phone longer as low as possible. Because you can sell phones that you can easily repair or keep longer, and you can give updates on the software and all these things. But then you also need to have a customer that really wants to keep the phone longer. And in the end, if you keep a phone 5 years, it will cost you less than when you keep a phone 2 years. The problem is that people break their screens. So then you have to buy a new screen. It's like, oh, wait a minute, let's just wait for my carrier to offer me a new phone. Yep.
The what's the struggle of getting Fairphone to America?
It's not really a struggle. It's a decision not to, and it has to do with the growth, manageable growth of the company. The US is a very interesting market. Obviously, there's also quite some. I think there's quite some demand looking at the PR and the communication around it. It's just that there's still so much to improve also in our operations and everything. It's a tough market. And you do, especially in the US, you want to do it right. And we first want to get the company, really, to an operational excellence level, which is really the focus at the moment, so that we can, that it's as a scale up, it functions, it's manageable. We have our processes in order before we move to a new big market, and also because we know that the current market in Europe has still enough growth potential for Fairphone to do that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a massive market as well. I was just asking selfishly is all I was asking for.
No. Yeah, but one of the main reasons is also we would have to develop another phone on all the frequencies of the US frequencies, and it's not just sending over phones to the US. You also have to put in service and repairs and all these things, which we have been talking with people with companies in the US for partnerships around this, but we're just not ready for it.
Yeah. The hardware is one thing, right? That's obviously it's a massive mountain to undertake to create your idea of what an ethical supply chain is. But going to the software side for a little bit, would there ever be a Pharaoh S, so to speak? Because right now it's skinned or run on Android, correct?
Yeah, what we've done is we've taken an approach of as fair as possible on this one. So we run it with Android, where everything works. The Google services, everything is installed in it. But with a few clicks, you can actually run a Google free version of Android. So where no Google services installed, so we offered there some open source version of the services like the Play Store and like Mail and that kind of stuff. But we also have community collaborations with Ubuntu. So Ubuntu Touch runs on it, and Jolla Sailfish also runs on Fairphones. So there are other operating systems more. Yeah, it can be a discussion around what makes an operating system fair.
Yeah,
let's say
it's crazy.
More open operating systems like Ubuntu Touch also run on the Fairphone, and we also make sure that developers can download the full binaries online so that they can develop their own versions, of their Androids on the phone.
And the one thing that you guys recently did was equity crowdfund for, I believe, about $2 million. Is that right?
Yeah, 2.5 million euros.
Yeah. So what was? I just think it's such an interesting new world of raising capital and crowdfunding kind of merging together, and not a lot of people still don't really know about it yet or how it really works. So can you just talk a little bit about your experience with equity crowdfunding, and were you surprised at how much you raised, and was it mostly from current, Fairphone users that put up some money during the raise?
Sure. Yeah. So Fairphone has a very long. I mean, we're not that old, but we have a history from the start with crowdfunding. From which the first two crowdfundings we did was pre-sale crowdfunding. So we actually, the whole company was financed through pre-sales from the start. So we've sold 25,000 phones before we even had a phone. Before we even knew how to make phones, actually. So that was kind of scary. But anyway, so we had we pre-sold 7.5 million euros of phones. So that was our first crowdfunding. Then we had another one of 10 million, also pre-sales, which meant people would buy the phone and would get it shipped around half a year later. And the equities crowdfunding was different in that sense that we really had people, become shareholder or certificate holder of the company, so really own part of the company. The Dutch financial legal system doesn't allow crowdfunding higher than 2.5 million. Okay. So that's why we capped it to 2.5 million. But it also, I think we could have done more than that.
Yeah.
And it's a really strong. We did it part of a bigger raise. Of equity and debt, but for us the real important part was to it fits so well with Fairphone as a platform for people to be part of, and more of an inclusive way of building your company instead of doing the financing behind the screens, and it forces you also to be very open about your whole business. And even though we're not profitable yet, and what we're working on now is that it was kind of scary to put that out there because we were profitable in the start, and then we had some hard times, and now we had to people perceive us as a huge success, which we are, but still they don't expect us to still have to need investment to keep the company running, but. It didn't matter. It was like, investors know that. Investors know it takes time to build companies. But even then, it's such a strong signal from people that they believe in what you do and they just want to be part of it. So I would recommend crowdfunding, especially the equity crowdfunding, to everyone. In terms of who invested, was about a third of our own community, a third of an existing crowdfunding community connected to the platform, and a third of new people actually that didn't know about Fairphone or were not a customer yet. So it brings you a lot, but on the other hand, you also have to be aware of the fact that you put everything out in the open, and you have to answer a lot of questions, which we've done from the start. But it should fit your model. If you're a B2B company, you don't really need to this huge PR reach and everything, and you want to slowly build up your company, and you can do it through investments. I don't know if crowdfunding would be the best way.
Going back to the hardware for a second, phones are one thing, and it's sort of the one that everybody on the planet is going to have. But what about other electronics? Because if you can make a phone, you can probably make a tablet, right? You can make a Fair tablet, or you can make a Fair laptop or something else. So is there ever going to be a scenario where you look at other product lines to get more people in the door? Or if I'm a Fairphone user, right, or customer, I'd probably buy the Fair laptop, right, or the Fair tablet, or the Fair whatever, right?
No, I definitely. I think it's the same goes for extending the portfolio as going to the US. We want to really get everything in order on the basics. So we're aiming for the basics to get that right, and obviously from there you can expand your portfolio into other products. We don't have like set products yet that we are thinking of, but it's safer for the company. So you can diversify your portfolio. You can you have several revenue streams. Also in terms of components supplies, it's easier if components are missing there and you don't have production. You can move to another. So there's also from a business side reasons to do that. From an impact side as well, because you can move to other areas. And it is indeed, a lot of these products, they share the same supply chain. But at the moment, we don't have any concrete plans to launch new products or different products.
What's the time period?
I do think so that the great thing about, even though it's called Fairphone, I do because we are the first sustainable electronic brand in the market of consumer electronics. I do think that our brand is really powerful enough to have more than just phones. I think that it could be it could be a portfolio, and I think that's the great thing about being a social enterprise, that actually the product is also kind of a means to an end, to have impact and to follow your mission. Because in 10 years from now, we might not even be using any phones anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, great point. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting when, I don't know, the phone, because the phone is not necessarily a phone anymore, right? I mean, it's more of a utility. So it's just used for different things like shopping and paying for things, right? Or it's your wallet now, or it's almost not a phone anymore the way that we think of a phone, right? Where we talk to people on it, right? It's from day to day, I don't really talk to many people actually, like dialing the phone. It's mostly through, messaging or, social networks or all these different things where you just need a Wi-Fi connection rather than a traditional, phone line.
Yeah, and people get addicted to it. I mean, there's more and more research on it that there's that we have to balance better our connectedness with the offline part to prevent information overload and that kind of things. And I think that's also one of the things that with our brand that we've been also working on from the start. At the Fairphone 1, we actually launched with with an app on it, which was called Peace of Mind, which would incentivize you to not use your phone. It would actually celebrate when you when you didn't use your phone for an hour. It would like, congratulations, man, you didn't touch your phone for an hour. So
that's pretty cool.
Well, you see that happening. There's so many apps that actually will also use your phone now, but it was really back then. It was we were one of the first to actually encourage people to meet in real instead of just being connected all day.
Going back to the supply chain real quick, is it? I know this is another. I'm trying to have you solve like the entire world right now, but
the world peace part.
Yeah. So, because you said that the supply chain, some of the problems is that some of them go. You could be a supplier 1 year, but then they go out of business, so you got to find one the next year, and so on and so on, right? So that's some of the complexity of having a constant stream of people you can work with and manufacturers that you can count on. Is it possible for Fairphone to kind of have their own facility in some way to where they can mitigate the closing down of certain things, so where the production is more streamlined, and you can know that every year this production area is going to be there, and do what you need.
Yeah, there's several things you can do as a company to prevent the normal dynamics, like the seasonality and everything. It also has to do with your the continuity in which you are going to give forecast and everything. You don't want to build big peaks that they have to get like temporary labor into the factory. A lot of bad stuff happens when there's a lot of temp workers around. So that is the behavior of you as a company towards the factories. So your question is, can we vertically integrate, basically build the phone from the mines to here as Fairphone is just not possible. Mm-hmm. What we could do is say, and some, it has been until recently that Nokia had its facilities in Finland and in Europe, and phones were being made here. But then you have to ask yourself, what does it mean when a phone is made here? Making a phone means putting together a lot of components, right, and subcomponents and materials and mechanics, and then putting software on it and integrate it. It doesn't mean that our factory, the factory we make the phones in, the factory we work with that makes the phones, they have a bill of material, a supply chain to manage of 1,200 components. So, and these 1,200 components are not made by 1,200 factories. They are made by maybe hundreds of factories who do different things. But these hundreds of factories also have suppliers of materials, and maybe also subcomponents. And then, so even if you go down into the supply chain, you have tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The further you go down into the supply chain, the worse conditions get also. So one of the things that we try to do is not to try to tackle, to manage every factory that is connected in a supply chain, but choose a few of those factories in different tiers and work with them to integrate full supply chains from the mines up to the product. So, for example, we've done that with Fairtrade Gold, where we do have control over the supply chain from the mine up to the printed circuit board manufacturer that goes into our phone. So we can say there's Fairtrade Gold in our phone. And we have to do that by following every step of the gold itself up to the moment that it goes into our phone. And there's like 3 or 4 steps in between before the gold can actually be used to make printed circuit boards. So we do work on certain components and then work with factories along the line. It's just not possible to say, well, we're going to take control over the whole supply chain. And we could even build the phone in that way in Holland, but then still we would have suppliers from China and countries where we would still have to look at how the working conditions are.
Sure. And the Fairtrade Gold, did you guys choose gold because it's just a mineral that has a more sophisticated supply chain set up, and it it's one mineral you can tackle right now and make it, quote unquote, fair trade?
No, well, there were already there's a pragmatic side to it, but there's also a side to it that has to do with the mineral itself. The pragmatic part is that there's already a mine in Peru where they have fair trade certified gold. We're setting up a gold program in Uganda where we focus on child labor programs. It's a mineral that's being, it's very valuable. So it's also, it speaks also to the mind of people. So it's I think it's imagination of people. So I think it's also a mineral that in that sense that's easier to understand. But most importantly, gold, tin, tungsten, and tantalum have been on the list already for a while as conflict minerals. And we started Fairphone as a campaign around conflict minerals. So our origin, our DNA is really around creating awareness around the conflicts related to the mining of minerals, and gold is one of them. So it has to do with also our focus on certain areas, of which a main area is the conflict minerals themselves.
The last question I have is just about your journey in general. Over the lifetime of Fairphone so far, what has that journey been like? For you and for your family and for the people that are involved in your life. Sometimes it can be difficult to talk to people about this kind of stuff because it's there's a little bit personal responsibility then that comes with knowing certain things about how things are made and all the different things that come with the dark side of a lot of this stuff. So how's that journey been for you just as an entrepreneur and, just as a father and trying to help people understand in your life, like, what's going on and what your mission is?
Yeah, so it's been an amazing journey, but at the same time it's been like a manic ride in a way. And I think that the things I've traveled a lot already in my life. I've seen quite a lot of the world. I've also seen I've worked at areas where there's a lot of misery. So I think that those aspects of the finding out how basically the world works and also the dark sides of it was not the part that really made it difficult or anything. What did make it difficult was the dilemmas you're facing and the decisions you have to make and the compromises you have to do when being a company, especially when you're running the company. And I think also, the pressure that's on you when something so successful and so fast goes. And I compare it with flying a plane while still building it and not knowing how to fly. Mm-hmm. It's kind of difficult. And so it's been tough at sometimes. And after 2.5-3 years, I collapsed also. So my wife had to get me to the mental health clinic here because I just was laying on the floor and not moving anymore. So I was just exhausted. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that what happens with you when you go into this ride of a company that's going and growing and growing, you're kind of creating your own monster at the same time. How beautiful, from the outside world and how beautiful the impact is that you're doing, but you're creating your own kind of monster in terms of not, you have your kids, you have your family, you have this, you have to let go a lot of things that you're, and give up a lot of things to get there. And all the, I think one of the hardest things, which I also, told you in the beginning, is that when you move from being I've worked in nonprofits, most of my life. When you move from being a designer, artist, a idealist into being an entrepreneur, you're also going to be bitten by the economic system as quite a lot. Yep. And that is I think when they go into social entrepreneurship have to really be aware of that. Your ideals are there, but when you grow into a big system, it's going to be very hard to keep your values aligned all the time, and that is what really broke me. But I also learned a lot from it. And after my after that burnout, I came back and I just had one thing I wanted to do, and is that I also wanted to be able to move away from my position as CEO, because I also knew that scaling a company takes so much different skills and mindset and expertise than starting something. I'm really good at selling stuff that's not there yet. and there are people who are really good at selling stuff that's there. so I made the decision last year in November to hand over the CEO position to Eva, who has been scaling companies before, and Eva is now the CEO of Fairphone, and I moved to the I'm still in the board and I'm still involved, but I'm really happy to have a position where I can have a bit more distance and also see all these beautiful things that you forget when you're into the operations too much.